Yo, PatrickReza here. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make and process my sub bass.
1, 2, 3.
Today we're going to be focusing on sub bass, which typically resides from 120 Hz down to 20 Hz, and it's usually the deep bass sound that you hear at festivals and clubs that's coming out of the subwoofers. So for this tutorial, you guys are going to throw your headphones on so you can hear all of those frequencies. Make sure you get the proper listening experience so you can really hear the differences as I'm going through it. So to start, I just have made a simple bass line. It goes from F sharp to G and then down to D, back to F sharp, G, F sharp, and then C sharp. So this is going to be in the key of F sharp minor. So to start, just let you listen to it. Cool. So that's what the bass line sounds like right now. Obviously, it's not hitting those sub frequencies though, so I'm going to show you guys how to make sub bass. I like to use Serum personally. You can use Operator or Massive. It basically just, you need any kind of synth that can make a sine wave. So to start, we're going to open up the first oscillator A on Serum, and we're going to go to Basic Shapes. And from there, it's going to open up a sine wave. So now it'll sound like this, which is still a little too high. So remember I said sub bass kind of resides in the 120 to 20 Hertz frequency zone. So if I put a spectrum, and I love my spectrum, I'm going to put a spectrum on the bass channel, and you guys can check it out, where this is kind of peaking. So right now, we're kind of at the 90 Hertz region, but for an F sharp song, that's pretty high. So if I bring this an octave down, so if I'm going to go into Serum right here where it says octave, and I'm just going to click, drag, and drop down an octave, and now it sounds like this. And you can see now we're more in the 40 Hertz, 50 Hertz region. So if you're playing notes like C, they might be higher, closer to 100, but typically we're going to be in this low subby bass region, and that's because most headphones and most subwoofers and speakers go down to 20 Hertz. Typically they'll cut off somewhere around 30 to 20 Hertz depending, so we're not going to want to use notes that are lower than that. And just to give you an example of that, I'm going to bring this down to C. So this is what this bass line would sound like if we were playing it on C, and I'll open up into the spectrum so you can check this out too. So that's at 30 Hertz. And we can, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can barely hear it in my headphones. So this wouldn't be adequate for like a club or a festival setting because it's going to not reproduce the way you want it to. Basically, the sine wave is vibrating or repeating itself so slowly that we can't physically hear it with our ears. We could only maybe feel it. So with that said, you're going to want to keep an eye out for the notes you choose when you're writing your bass lines. C is typically really low, and if you're going to be playing C sub notes, you're probably going to add some saturation, which I'll show you later on in this tutorial. So let's just bring it back up to F sharp right now. So F sharp's a really good note to start your bass lines on. I've noticed a lot of dubstep and trap, and I mean myself included, a lot of my songs will start on either G minor, F sharp, or F minor, depending on the kind of mood I want to give it. Typically, G has a little bit of a higher harmonic sound, so it sounds closer like this. This is what F sharp sounds like. And then F is down here. So they all have slightly different sounds. So it's always good to pick a key when you're writing a song and stick to it, otherwise it's just going to sound like a mess. So with that said, let's move forward with the F sharp minor. I'm going to show you a few more tricks in Serum to get your sub bass to kind of stand out more in your mix. So if you think about the way your music is listened to, a lot of people aren't going to be listening to your music through subwoofers or professional monitors or professional monitoring headphones. So in that case, what you're going to want to do is kind of bring out some of the upper frequencies. So with that, you can do a few tricks to kind of give the appearance or the sound of your sub bass moving, having more upper harmonics, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that right now. So the first thing I like to do is, if you guys listen to the song, it's more trappy type beat. we're going to kind of emulate what an 808 does. And so an 808, instead of just residing on F sharp or whatever note you're playing, I'm just going to say F sharp because that's what I'm using in the tutorial. Instead of it residing on F sharp, it's actually going to peak down. So it's going to drop down in pitch. So the way we do this in Serum is we can use envelopes for this. So the first envelope is used for volume, if you guys don't know. And the second envelope is used, you can assign it to anything basically. So I'm going to use it for pitch. So to do that, I'm going to just click on this semicircle right here and drag it up to where it says coarse pitch. Now coarse pitch goes up and down 64 semitones. So 5 octaves, I believe, if I'm doing my math correct. So if you guys listen to what it sounds like right now, no difference. And that's because the envelope is basically exactly where it was before. But if we start to mess with this envelope, say we bring the sustain down a little bit, we're going to hear the pitch drop now. But if you notice, it's going too far. So we want it to stay at F sharp. So if you guys notice, I'm going to show you guys on the spectrum too so you can see it. So it starts around 80 hertz at D sharp and then it drops all the way to 25 hertz, which is like G. But we want it to stay on F sharp. So the way we do this, there's 2 ways. You can do a shortcut. So if you guys look at the coarse pitch right here, if I hold Alt Shift and click on the coarse pitch, and that's Alt Shift on PC, I think it might be Command or Option Shift on Mac. So what it does, if you guys will notice, this little blue area, the modulation area, it moves. So it's either going to be in the middle of the semicircle, or if you click, it goes to the right of the semicircle. And you can also do this, if you don't want to use the shortcut, you can go into the Matrix tab and see this is where we have all of our modulations set up. So here it says envelope 2 is assigned to the oscillator A coarse pitch, and this is how it's moving. So you guys can see the middle is going to be 0, so it's actually dropping below 0, and that's why we're getting the tone to be so low, going down to G, even though we're playing F sharp on the MIDI keyboard. So to fix this, same thing as the Alt Shift shortcut, you can just click on the type right here, and it changes the arrow. So it changes it just going to the right instead of going left to right. So this is what just going to the right sounds like. So it ends perfectly, if you guys will notice on here, it should end, you know, roughly on that F sharp pitch. Now, with that said, the more you bring this up, the more of a pitch down you're going to get. So you can make it really crazy, but if you bring it down, so depending on how aggressive you make this, you can make it, you know, ramp down a bunch or ramp down just a little bit. So today we're going to not do too much. And then also we're going to mess with the envelope a little more so it's not pitching down the whole way. So we're going to want to make it more of a thump. Very, very way more thumpier if you guys watch Carnage's masterclass. So now we can use the decay knob to kind of make that thump in the beginning. You know, just a little bit. So now the note plays from C and then it resides down on the F sharp note. And you should hear that thump. Cool. So just to show you what that sounds like without it, I'm going to turn the output at 0. This is what we had before, just steady notes. And then the more we bring that up, we're starting to get that pitch down effect. Cool. So that's like the basics of making an 808 sub bass. Now we can get a little more in depth. So to make it stand out more, I'll show you guys a trick I learned from Nightmare. So if you guys go into your audio effects under Corpus in Ableton, there is a preset called Kick Tight. So I'm going to drop this down onto my sub bass. And what this does is it basically accentuates the frequencies and it brings up some upper harmonics. So I'm going to put the spectrum afterwards so you guys can actually see what it's doing. And so there's only 3 knobs you really have to pay attention to in this preset. So the first one is the tune knob. So that correlates to the tune of the sub bass. And so our sub bass in this is F sharp. So in this case scenario, we're going to tune it to F sharp. Luckily for me, it's already tuned to F sharp. But let's say you are in G. All you do is click on that tune and just use your arrow keys up or down. And you see the pitch down here is changing now. So what I'm going to want is F sharp 0. And then I can play with the gain knob over here and the dry wet to kind of bring out more harmonics or less harmonics. So this is what it sounds like right now, just turned on. And without it, just to give you guys an example, so it's a lot less powerful. So once I turn it on, it gives it a lot more power and strength. So the next thing we're going to want to do is kind of mess with the gain knob. If you guys want more power, you can just boost this up. And I'm going to over-exaggerate just so you guys can see what it's doing on the spectrum. It's basically creating more harmonics above that root fundamental frequency. So once you guys have kind of got the sound you like, you can play with the dry wet. So this is 0, obviously not doing anything. So going back to what I was saying earlier about people not maybe listening through subwoofers or listening through monitoring headphones or monitors, this trick will help your listeners if they're listening on, say, a MacBook or a laptop or, you know, iPhone speakers. They're going to be able to hear the sub. It's not going to obviously feel as deep, but because we're creating those upper harmonics, they're going to be able to hear the sub as opposed to not hearing any sub. So it's really important to do, and you guys don't need to overuse this. You guys can, usually when I'm using it, I'll have the gain at -15 and just kind of boost this up. Just maybe a little more gain. Just to kind of get those upper harmonics to ring a little bit more. Cool, so that is kick tight. Now the next thing I want to show you guys is frequency separation. So a really big thing right now is to put distortion on your sub bass. But if you just throw distortion on your sub bass, you're going to get a really muddy sound. And when you're playing it out of subwoofers or, you know, at a festival or a club, the sub bass is going to sound really muddy and messy. So to avoid that, what we do is frequency separation. And the easiest way to do that is to just duplicate. Okay, well, first, before you duplicate your channel, what we're going to want to do is get an EQ. You can use any EQ. I just like Pro Q. And I'm just going to take this, make it a high cut at 110 hertz. You can do 100, doesn't matter. I'm going to set it to 96 decibels. And now what we're doing is we're shelving off any of the frequencies above 110. So it sounds like this, a little cleaner. As opposed to this, I'm going to put the spectrum behind so you can see what it's doing. This is with it on. And this is with it off. So just cleaning up some of these upper harmonics. So we're going to turn that on. We're going to close this channel, and then we're going to duplicate it. So I'm just going to hit Command D, or on PC Control D, and it's going to just make a carbon copy of the exact same thing. So now it sounds like this on the lower channel. Cool. So now that we have this, I'm going to open up the EQ that I just set, and I'm going to set it to low cut. So I'm going to flip it. So now it just sounds like this. You can barely hear it, right? There's just a little click, basically, and that's because we need to accentuate those upper harmonics. So the way I typically do this is using distortion or saturator, maybe a guitar pedal plugin. So one of my favorites is Universal Audio's Raw. So let me just drag that onto the channel. And the way this works is it's just three knobs. You have your volume knob, your filter knob, which you're going to want to open up all the way, otherwise it'll shelf off the low frequencies, and then your distortion knob. So this is what it's... So you guys can kind of hear the frequencies getting distorted on the top, on the high ends. Now another thing you're going to want to do is, since you guys can't really hear too many frequencies, we might want to go into Serum and pick a different wavetable, because typically sine waves will only make that fundamental root note shine. So with that said, we can go into the frequencies. One that I would like to use a lot is this basic CJW. If you'll notice, the sine wave has these little peaks at the top, and if you morph through it, it turns into more of a triangle wave and then a saw wave. So now we're getting that really, really distorted sound. So that's because this has a lot, just those two little tiny little peaks right here and right here make a huge difference in the way the wavetable is moving, and because of that, it's adding distortion basically. So the more we go through this, the more distortion we'll see. But now we're getting this. Sounds a lot more distorted. So now if I play this on top of this, I'm going to close the raw, and I'm going to play them together. Now we're going to get the fundamental root note from this top sub bass, which is going to give us a really smooth, solid, powerful sounding sub, and then above it we're going to have all those upper harmonics that are really distorted. And sounds a lot better than if we were to just throw the distortion on top of that first sub, because it's going to make all those frequencies on the first sub down here really muddy. So I'm going to take off raw because I know a lot of you guys might not have it, but I wanted to show you guys what I use. Another thing that's really awesome in Ableton is the saturator. The saturator. So I'm going to drop that on. And this is kind of similar to the raw distortion plugin I was telling you guys about. So you basically have these presets to choose from. Then you have a dry wet here, and you have a drive here. So this is the overdrive, how much it's overdriving it. So if we just listen to it right now, it sounds pretty subby. But the more we bring this drive out, and oh, well, the dry wet's on 0. Let's bring that up too. Now you guys can start to hear those upper harmonics. And it's really important you guys put your EQ all the way at the end, because these saturators could make low end frequencies that weren't there before. So make sure your EQ that's cutting out the lows is all the way at the end. And I just drag the spectrum all the way to the end too, so you guys can see what it's doing. And now you guys can hear kind of similar sound to what the raw was doing. If you guys change if you guys change it to say hard curve, you'll get a really aggressive sound, kind of like in the song Look At Me. So you guys should just play around with this stylistically on how you want it to sound, but use a saturator. The other thing I like to use too is, so I'll delete the saturator. So these are all just different options on how you can distort those upper frequencies, is the amplifier. So if you guys notice, we're also getting a distorted sound out of this. This is what it sounds like before. So, you know, very subby. But then we throw the amp on, and now we're getting distortion. You can click between. So depending on what you guys like, get a different sound. So now, with all of this said, we have distorted the upper harmonics, so people will be able to hear it on, you know, iPhones, MacBook, laptop speakers, etc. Things that might not be able to reproduce super sub bass frequencies. So let's just take a listen to what it sounds like now. Another thing, you guys, just a little trick for you guys. If you guys get into pitch bending your sub bass lines, it'll sound a lot more interesting. So I'm just going to, I did that on the first one, I'm going to copy and paste this on to the second one. You guys hear this ramp down. So you guys can have fun with that. The last thing I'm going to tell you guys about is, if we're going to go into the upper harmonic sub again, the one that doesn't have all the low end rumbly stuff, but the upper distorted stuff. If we just take a I'm going to solo it. If we just take a listen to this. So another trick to add more upper harmonics if you don't like to use distortion, or you could use it in conjunction with distortion, is to throw on some white noise or some different kind of noise on top of it. So I'm going to mute oscillator A just so we can hear what the noise sounds like. So that's really loud and abrasive, but if we kind of go through these analog noises, pink noise sounds really pleasing on the ears. It's less abrasive than white noise. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit. And this kind of gives the effect that it was produced on, say, like a TR-808, which might have some background noise. And it kind of gives it an analog feel to it. So if we play them in conjunction with each other, kind of mix the noise in. So now we have that noise in there, which is also adding to the amplifier. If I turn the amplifier off, it sounds like this. So still is creating some upper harmonics, obviously not as many. So with that said, let's take a listen to it now. So that's basically how I make and process my bass, my sub bass, my 808s. And just keep in mind that when you guys are producing, all of this stuff, all the creative stuff as far as bringing out the harmonics is totally up to you and how you guys want it to sound. I just wanted to show you guys a few different ways on how I've been doing it on my recent productions. Also, make sure you guys are using headphones when you guys are producing your sub bass, because you're going to want to be able to tell those little minute differences. So just like playing back that, I heard that the pitch bend drops too early, so I might want it to have something like this. So I'm going to copy and paste that. Now it sounds a little better. So it starts on F sharp and then drops down. But yeah, basically that's how I produce and make and process my sub bass using Ableton, Serum, a couple of the Ableton plugins. Kick-Tight is definitely a must. I love Kick-Tight. Shout out Nightmare. And the last thing you guys might want to do is just throw a limiter on, like I did in the kick tutorial. If you guys didn't watch that, go check it out. So you guys can use the Ableton limiter. I actually like to use the Pro L. And you just smack it on there and you should be good to go. You can boost this if you want more volume out of it, but I just like to smack it on there for now to make sure it's not clipping on the channel. Last thing, you guys are going to want to make sure that your sub bass is in mono. So I typically will do this on my master channel using Ozone. So using the imager right here, you'll see everything under 140 is set to -100, which makes it completely mono. But if you guys don't have Ozone, I can show you how to do it in Ableton very fast. There's this thing called utility under the audio effects, and you're just going to drop that onto the low. You just need this on the really low frequency, so the stuff that's under 100 hertz. And you just drop it onto the channel, and you guys will notice it has this mono button right here. That will make the whole signal mono. Now, if you have distorted your sub on top if you've distorted just your sub on one channel, you can use this thing called bass mono and set the frequency. So anything under 120, for example, in this case, would become mono. So just something to consider, because if your sub bass is stereo, you might get weird phasing issues when you're playing at a club. So if you guys listen now, just make sure it cleans it up a little bit and make sure it's only in the middle. It's not coming out the left and the right, which shouldn't happen theoretically in Serum, but weird things happen with software. So that's basically it. Next episode, I'm going to be showing you guys how to sidechain and how I sidechain and things to look out for and avoid when you guys are working with bass and kick. And it's going to be a really exciting mixing tutorial, because I'll be showing you guys how to get those two to blend. And in my opinion, those are the two most vital parts of a song. They're the foundation of a song, the kick, the bass. And then we're gonna go into snares, synths, some more Serum stuff. It'll be awesome. So tune in for that next time. If you guys learned anything, drop a like. If you guys have any questions, drop a comment down below. Also, if you guys are new around here, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell button to get notifications on when my next tutorial comes out. Until next time, my name is PatrickReza. Thank you guys. Peace.